I am an unaffiliated Michigan voter who was trained by the GOP to be a poll challenger on Wednesday, November 4th, beginning in the late morning until around 8 p.m. because I was told that they needed help. They were understaffed. I witnessed the room erupt in thunderous applause and derogatory cheering as Republican poll workers were picked off one by one and ejected from the room repeatedly by police escort throughout the day. By the end of the day, they had picked off so many GOP poll workers that there were probably only a few dozen left to monitor all of the processing stations in the room, which I'm told was between 130 and 160. Because of this, I had to move between several tables. One was processing a stack of roughly 35 ballots with pink challenge stickers on them. Many other tables also had similar stacks on them as well. None of the ballots appeared to be in the poll database, so the poll workers were simply entering 1/1/1900 as the birth dates and entering the addresses and names that no one seemed to be verifying and which I could not see to verify. When I would politely try to check such things, as had been the case throughout the entire day, I was told that I wasn't allowed within 6 feet of the tables even to verify ballots, and told that I was trying to kill people. I watched as the table simply passed in mismatched ballots and envelopes through the checking station. When I challenged it, and subsequent ballots that weren't in the poll book, the table supervisor laughed and said, "You can't do that." And several other operatives gave me the COVID runaround as I had gotten throughout the day, all trying to intimidate me and prevent me from doing my job, claiming that I was endangering their workers, trying to kill their people, and even holding a pen in a threatening way. Yet, when non-GOP operatives would stand near the tables and harass me, no one would give them any problem at all. At one point, a Democrat who was hanging back came up to harass me, and then a table supervisor showed up and because I was challenging a ballot. Once several table managers and non-GOP operatives have showed up to harass me, this Democrat operative simply melted back into the background with a satisfied grin on his face, knowing that he had caused me a problem. These people were like professional agitators whose job it was to sow discord among GOP workers who were trying to do their job and then get them kicked out. At some point, a GOP lawyer was brought in and confirmed that I was properly performing my duties. Instead of backing down, the table supervisor's supervisor and his supervisor and all the damn supervisors, they came up and they started arguing with the lawyer, telling him he didn't know what the law was.
1 minute.
In the meantime, the ballots continued to go through, so I stepped up to the table to inspect the next ballot briefly. The manager separated me from the table, wielding COVID as a weapon one more time, and walking towards me, forcing me to step further away. He made some innuendo about playing with him that made me uncomfortable, and then he said something to the effect of, "I will kick your ass or I will kick you out of here." And I said, and I looked at him and I quizzically, and I said, "Are you threatening me?" He repeated the mantra more than once as he began to wave down a police officer. I raised my voice so that others could hear what was going on, and at this point, I said, "Are you threatening me?" And at this point, the police officer arrived, and I did not ask any questions, and I was removed from the room without any due process. Realizing I had no recourse or rights, I grabbed my coat and I peacefully was escorted. I'd like to say one final thing.
Please wrap it up.
Okay. I saw several dozen military ballots throughout the day. I only saw 3 that were for President Trump. And I was also at your hearing the other day when the clerks were testifying. And one thing that stood out to me as a glaringly obvious thing, as an engineer, I'm a technical person. I love math. I have a fair bit of programming under my belt. Those people were not IT specialists. They know nothing. I assume they appeared to know nothing about programming, and yet they said multiple times throughout that hearing that it was the most secure election in history. And I would like to say that it seems like they have no credentials to be able to say that.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Senator McDonald.
Yeah, it's kind of a question for the group. I've been hearing a lot of troubling stories about harassment. So sick, I don't even want to say them. You're saying people call you a murderer, they're going to kick your ass, all these things. It sounds like there's a lot of experience in this room, poll watching. Have any of you ever experienced anything to that level ever before, any other election process?
So,
never? Is this seems unprecedented, the type of stories that you're sharing, so.
This was my first election. I didn't come there to agitate. I think I'm a likable guy. I came in there on Wednesday because I was told they were understaffed, so I thought this would be a good chance to just see how the process works. If I would have thought that it was going to be that much of a madhouse against the GOP people and it was so biased, I would have been there every day. I was not there with an agenda. I was there to just do my job, and they didn't like that simply because I had a GOP lanyard on, even though I'm an unaffiliated voter. They didn't know that.
Sounds like from the stories you're sharing, it was a complete sideshow. Hopefully it doesn't continue.
Professional agitator. That's the word that I would use to describe these people. They would melt back into the background as soon as they knew that they had accomplished their job of getting you agitated or kicked out.
Thank you.
They knew what they were doing.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Next, we have Andrew Miller, followed by Robert Cushman, followed by Andrew Sito. Welcome, Mr. Miller. You have 3 minutes.
My name's Andrew Miller. I was a poll worker on Tuesday and Wednesday. I originally applied to be a poll worker, but nobody ever got back to me. I tried twice to call the phone number for assistance. Both times I was on for over an hour on hold with no response, no way to leave a message. Let's get to it, though. Probably the most egregious one was on Tuesday evening after most of the tables had shut down. One table was still working at duplicating ballots. When I got there, there was 25 ballots that they were duplicating. One person quietly sat back and supposedly read the information, but from 6 feet away, I could not hear anything that he said. The other worker was filling in the ballot while being hunched over it, and there was another worker at the end of the table so that I could not see what was on the table. I had duplicated a ballot earlier that day. It was quite open. It worked well. I was asked by a table supervisor to participate in it. The ballot was stained. We worked through it. Everything was cool. We went to this one, and they were duplicating it, and I told the table manager that I needed to see those results, and he said I couldn't. And I said, why not? This is my job. I need to be able to see what the differences are between these two. And he said, no, duplicating ballots is just like voting. It's a personal endeavor, and I was not allowed to look at it. I stayed there for 4 ballots, and it all happened the same. I asked to challenge the ballots, and he said he would not be doing that. What else is there? Okay, I am also an engineer, so let's get to some of that. Every computer on Tuesday morning had an error code in the right-hand corner that says update was overdue. It was flashing on every single computer I looked at. I looked at least 20 of them. Also, about a third of the computers had the wrong time. At 10 a.m. in the morning, about a third of the computers said 2:59 p.m. I don't know how they keep track of when things are occurring when the time on the computer is not even correct. On Wednesday, I walked up to a table, and one of the computer operators was logging in, and she logged in as an admin. So she had full authority to do anything she wanted into that system. Did everybody in that facility use the admin in order to log into the computers? I also saw the routers with high amount of transferring and work when there was nobody even monitoring the copy machines that were collecting the ballots. Nobody was at the computers, but there was a lot of data going across those. I also was harassed by a number of people. At one table, there was...
Sir, I forgot to give you your 1-minute warning, so I'll give you some additional time.
I'm pretty much done, but
please, 30
just
seconds.
The harassment from... there was a table worker, then there was a Democrat worker, then there was me, and the table worker said that I needed to back up because I was too close and I did not have the 6-foot distance. But there was a person between her and myself that was a Democrat challenger. A lot of this could go away if you had one Republican at each table. I applied to be a worker. You've heard here multiple people applied to be workers, and we are all denied that. So instead of having these hearings, why don't we have a clean process? It would not fix the computer glitches that came through, but it would fix a lot of this other issues.
Thank you. Any members have a question? Senator Tice.
You said you applied to be a poll worker. When did you apply?
more than a month before the election.
So well in advance of the training, because
Oh, yes, it was before the training.
Okay, because we heard from the clerk in Wayne County that the people who applied that were denied were people who applied too late and the training had already been done. So
No,
I just wanted to clarify.
there was still training scheduled when I applied.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you for your time today. Did you submit your testimony in writing by any chance?
My affidavit contained
Okay.
everything that I had except for the admin.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Robert Cushman, and he'll be followed by Andrew Sito, followed by Shane Trejo. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, Mr. Cushman. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Senator McBroom, Michigan legislatures, and fellow citizens. My name is Bob Cushman. I'm a registered voter in Lyon Township, and I desire to testify concerning events in Detroit on November 4th, the day after the election. I believe that I witnessed evidence of mass election fraud on the morning of November 4th and the evening of November 4th, but I'm only going to talk about the morning right now. While I served as a trained and credentialed election challenger at the Detroit Absent Voter County Boards, TCF Center, Detroit. I arrived in the county boards at approximately 6:30 a.m. after being briefed in room 260. We'd been advised of a very large ballot drop, approximately in the vicinity of 4 a.m. Night shift observers had indicated that about 61 boxes had been delivered. I began observing the process of ballots at several counting boards. I quickly noticed that none, and I mean none, of the names were being scanned from the ballots were in the electronic poll books. All of the names that were found in the supplemental sheets. We know that the poll books, the electronic poll books, were updated on Sunday, November 1st. That meant that all of these new ballots had to have been brand new registered voters on Monday, November 2nd, or Tuesday, November 3rd. I found it very hard to believe that tens of thousands of people had registered in just 2 short days. So I began writing down the names on the ballots immediately after they were scanned by the computer poll worker. As soon as I began, I was severely obstructed by 5 different persons that I could no longer, such that I could no longer continue my legal responsibility as a poll challenger. These 5 persons comprised of a poll worker, a supervisor, an uncredentialed person, a Democrat challenger, and one of the top leaders of the AVCB. The details can be found in my affidavit. Does anyone believe that 30 or 40,000 new voters were actually signed up legally in 2 days? I implore every member of this board to protect the Constitution. I implore you to give us a full forensic audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cushman. Does any member have a question? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cushman. Did you submit your testimony in writing as well? Mr. Cushman, can you give us the testimony, a copy in writing as well? Thank you very much. Next, I have card for Andrew Sito, followed by Shane Trejo, and then Linda Brandis. Andrew Sito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
So my job was to be stationed at the TCF Center. I was in the middle of the room near the duplicate ballots. There's a table full of duplicate ballots. Throughout the whole night, I witnessed theft of duplicate ballots. My job was to follow them back to their tables of the counting boards, and where they would just take stashes of ballots, 4 or 5 ballots, take them to the table. I would stand there for 4 or 5 minutes. They wouldn't make any duplicates, never followed any duplicate procedures. They stashed them under their boxes, never put them in the bins. But couldn't do much about it, just write incident reports about it, which are documented. So, and then we had a new shipment announcement by Mr. Baxter at 4:30 a.m. on the microphone. He's saying, hey, we're going to have some ballots coming in. So these these boxes of ballots were brought in by Mr. Baxter and his team at 4:30 a.m. from the rear of the room of the TCF Center. So approximately, I witnessed them bringing in boxes from the rear of the room into the room. This is between 4:30 and 5. I estimate around 84 boxes placed on tables in the center of the room. Each box with approximately 600 ballots, totaling to approximately 50,000 ballots, equal to the 2 rounds before. Because we were there from 10 to 1, we did a round about 50,000, and then 1 to about 4, a second round about another 50,000, and then this last round, all you have to know is there's the same amount of ballots from the other 2 rounds. I'm not sure if they were all brought in from the back because I think they were commingled and also brought in from other rooms. So I'm not sure how many ballots were brought in from the back and then from the other areas, but they're put in all. It was just about the same amount. So most volunteers left at 5 a.m. and the poll workers had a shift change between 5 and 6 a.m. I stayed. At 6 a.m., Mr. Baxter and the management got back on the microphone and yelled, "This is what democracy is supposed to look like," in front of everyone with the new shift. Right after that, the whole room cheered, and you can tell there was not a balancing in the poll workers there, even at that shift. Based off my sampling, because I was
1 minute.
Okay, sampling off of the dozen of the duplicate ballots from 6 to 2 p.m. 2 p.m. the next day, none of those were for Trump. The other 2 rounds, I only saw 1 for Trump. 3 other challengers told me they witnessed the same sampling. I challenged ballots, all refused. Challenging procedure never properly carried out. Never issued challenge ballots, no track or remedy, no record. I resorted to writing incident reports. Poll workers changed duplicate ballots to straight Democrat tickets. That's why you see in the tabulators 2 different tickets. I witnessed employees filling in bubbles for the Democrat straight ticket. And so at the tabulator, I also witnessed what the Dominion employee said with the rerunning of the ballots. I saw that several times. At 2 p.m., I left the room for 5 minutes. Right after I left the room, they blocked it out, covered the windows up. I couldn't get back in for exceeded COVID capacity. I called the federal prosecutor. I called the FBI, made a report. I called the Secretary of State fraud tip line. I called Detroit Department of Elections multiple times, and there was no answer.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I have a quick question. When it comes to the duplicate ballots that you were in the middle of the room watching, those are blank ballots for the purpose of refilling out when necessary?
Yeah.
And so you were solely in charge of watching those?
There's a few of us, but there's too many tables, so when people would come and grab ballots, and for example, if there was like a coffee stand or something, which I never saw that night, they all looked like clean ballots, we would follow them back, and there would be several people in line waiting to follow that person back. And so once that process was done, I would come back to the center table and wait for the next person to come in.
What's your recollection, with the group of ballots that came in at 4:30 and you stayed and began observing, and you say that, there was almost every one of them or all of them were for Mr. Biden. About how many ballots would you say you observed at that point?
That shift, probably my sampling is over a dozen of duplicate ballots. And also we had some issues where we were making duplicates of the duplicate ballots. And when I asked the employees why we were making duplicates of duplicates, they confirmed to me that this is a duplicate of a duplicate, but the tabulator said unknown reasons.
So they were throwing away their first duplicate to replace it with a second one was what was... Okay, but so you're saying you observed several dozen ballots in that time?
That one shift from the 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., I sampled about a dozen duplicate ballots, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Vice Chair Lucido.
I appreciate you coming out, and I appreciate everybody being so patient to go through this process. At the end, your testimony has been submitted to us by way of written, or is there affidavit?
Yes, affidavit is submitted.
Perfect. These ballots that were brought in the middle of the night, early morning, whatever you want to call it, where did you see this go to? I'm looking at these numbers here, 84 boxes, 600 each in each box, over 50,000 ballots. Where did these ballots go?
They were just processed just like any other round. So they were brought in from the back, which
In sleeves, again, mail sleeves. What I mean by that, you know what I'm talking about? The mail
banker boxes with sleeves over the banker boxes. The sleeves were removed. They opened up the lids and they placed them on about 10-foot tables.
Yep.
There's about 7 of them, and they placed about maybe like a dozen boxes per table, 10-foot tables, banker boxes pulled, with the width so they can place them out, and the ballots are facing towards you, and they were double stacked, filled to the top. Each bundle is about 50 ballots.
Got it.
So maybe like 150, 300 stacked on top, each box.
Did they, after they put them on these 10-foot tables, were workers taking the ballots and then putting them into the machine?
Yeah, so that's when Mr. Baxter said, this is what democracy is supposed to look like. Then they came in and took the ballots. The employees took the ballots, took them back to their processing tables, and everyone just did it at once. And most of the Republican workers were gone at that time.
50,000 roughly, right?
It was the same exact amount as the 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. round and the 1 a.m. round to 4 a.m. round.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see anything else after that period of time? Did you stay on? You stayed on till in the morning hours?
I stayed in until I was kicked out. I was not. They said, you can leave the room for a snack. I left the room for a snack, and immediately they closed it down.
What time was that?
Around 2 p.m.
Okay. So you were there 4 o'clock in the morning all the way?
Yeah, the whole shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Did you or anyone you know ask where the origin of the late night ballot delivery was? What precincts it came from?
I did not ask. However, the person right next to me grabbed me by the, pulled me to the side and said, I see a truck at the loading dock coming in the back of the TCF center. And by the time I looked, Mr. Baxter and his management team were personally holding in boxes and carrying them in to the tables.
Okay. Senator Tice.
The other deliveries, they didn't come in this way?
No, this delivery was unlike every other that I witnessed from the other 2 rounds. Yeah.
Thank you.
See no further questions. Thank you very much for your testimony.
No problem.
Next, I have Shane Trejo, followed by Linda Brandis, followed by Bill Carzon. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, sir. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Shane Trejo. I'm going to be reading a little bit from my sworn affidavit and giving additional testimony, and I'll submit all that after the fact. I'm a registered voter and a credentialed poll challenger in the state of Michigan. I was a GOP poll challenger at the TCF Center Absentee Voter Counting Board in Detroit, Michigan, on election night Tuesday from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. I was there at approximately 3 to 3:30 a.m., and I saw the huge dump of ballots that were delivered to the counting hall. I noticed that the City of Detroit Clerk's office there was their emblem on the white van that showed up with the ballots. Janice Winfrey's name was on there, and a number presumably for Janice Winfrey's office. I estimated that it was over 50 boxes that I counted, and I estimate that up to 1,000 could have been fit in each box, large boxes. There was no chain of custody. There was no accountability. There was no transparency. Nobody knew where these ballots had been. They had to be turned in at 8 p.m. They showed up at approximately 3:30 a.m. So 7.5 hours is a long time for these ballots to be kind of in limbo, not with anyone knowing where they are. There have been no answers up to this point, and whistleblowers are being intimidated. There is a campaign of terror that is being instituted by people such as Attorney General Dana Nessel to coerce public officials into certifying the vote and rubber stamping this insanity as quickly as possible. Keep in mind that you could not videotape at TCF. It was strictly prohibited, potentially a criminal act. That's why all of these sworn affidavits, there's hundreds and hundreds of them, are so important, because they are the key proof that severe impropriety took place in Detroit on election night. So all we want is a proper, thorough, independent investigation into what the hundreds of whistleblowers are coming forth and saying, with a forensic audit of all the suspicious ballots. We know what these investigations would yield, and we suspect that the interests desperately trying to obstruct the investigations, I think we know I think they know what would be found as well. So I implore you to do the right thing, and for your country, for your family, for your conscience, and stop this fraud. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any members have a question? Oh, thank you very much for your time today. Next, I have Linda Brandis, followed by Bill Carzon, and then Christy Clamer. Linda, are you here or nearby?
I'll take her place.
Well, many of you have waited a long time, I know. We'll keep on going through the pile here. Linda Brandis? Okay. Bill Carzon, are you here? Mr. Carzon, I presume? Welcome
Yes,
to the
Bill
Senate
Carzon.
Oversight Committee.
Yes,
You
thank you
have
very
3
much
minutes.
for having me here to speak. I'm a resident of Wayne County, registered voter, poll challenger, was registered at the TCF Center. I was at the TCF Center from November 3rd, 10 p.m. till November 4th, around 5 a.m., so I was there during the observation of the ballots that came in that have been discussed many times. I was made aware of the process, obviously, with the counting board tables, so I did witness some things with ballots taken to tabulators and run. Some cases they were run multiple times. Of course, there's a zeroing out. It wasn't always obvious to see how that was done completely. I witnessed on at least one occasion where operator number 5, who basically carries the ballots over to the stations for tabulation, was handed back a ballot. Didn't fully understand at that point why that would possibly be, because those are to be returned into the secure boxes. I would say between 1 a.m. and 4 in the morning, roughly, it was very quiet. It was a very big lull in the overall center. Many people can attest to folks with heads on tables. This was on not only the polling stations or the absentee ballot stations, but also at the tabulator table areas. In fact, I witnessed some person on a tabulator screen playing a card game. I sat there with my son, who was also there as a poll challenger, and another acquaintance as we watched this. So to give you the sense, there was a big lull. Around 4 o'clock, 3:30, I think I've heard 4 o'clock, is by my estimation. There was a delivery, I would estimate, because the table in the center next to the main stage is where the ballots were brought to. Somewhere at least 60 boxes were brought in. They did have a wrap around them, which was what I expected to be standard. When that work was basically prepared for people to come up and get it, the person called up and said, "Come and get your extra work." They were called up by precincts, and then those groups would come in small sections and take these back, and then run them to their table. So just to give you a feel for that environment and what was taking place. I was also taking the opportunity, because of the canvassing that was taking place. I was at the canvassing board meeting that Monica Palmer spoke about earlier, and I will just tell you, it was extremely hostile. It was very personal. It was very aggressive with regards to the threats that were made to her personally, her family.
1 minute left.
Yep. And I would just say that really didn't have any place, and nobody shut that down. It was high intimidation. And Mr. Kinloch, or his other representative on the Democratic side, made no comments to calm this down. So when the vote was taken to not certify, of course, there was a side discussion that actually had some other further developments that everybody's aware of. I would just say nobody talked about the fact that they had so many out of precinct locations. When the meeting began, a pile of affidavits were set on the table. Mr. Kinloch said they were received by himself in that day. They really weren't used, reviewed, or anything, just submitted to minutes. So really no benefit in providing that. The meeting was delayed by 2 hours to start, a very strange delay. As Monica said, there was no executive summary. The numbers were rattled off regarding out of balance. I would just say it was a very hostile environment, and the main takeaway from my side is, I think you guys know, an out of balance precinct can't be recounted. That doesn't make any sense. If it's out of balance, it should be.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Senator McDonald.
Thank you, sir. Sir, were you given any guidelines at all on how to do the work properly. Was there a chain of command of any type that you saw?
Yeah, there were. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was.
I thought you were talking about information we received.
Yeah, was there a chain of command? Were you given any guidelines whatsoever on how to do the work effectively?
There was information that was provided. Some people could watch video sessions that were provided with some information. There was some written material that was provided. So to some extent, and I heard about the on-site location activity, that was not extended as an opportunity to us, but we did get information and training and material that could be looked at to understand the process, yes.
So there was a semblance of organization? It sounds completely disorganized. Was there even a semblance of organization at all within the
I thought you were referring to my or our information to be a poll challenge.
Yeah, your witnessing of the poll challenge. Was there any organization, even a semblance of organization?
So I personally was on table number 18 mainly,
Okay.
and then I walked around. That table did a fairly, I think, consistent job. There were times where, poll worker, the person operator 1 to operator 2 may not have confirmed a number and name on the ballot, the scan and the handoff and this kind of closed loop process. I did witness that at other tables also being missed. When there was a 3-hour lull with people literally with their heads on the table, there was a lot of downtime there. And this wasn't just at the tables. This was right down the tabulator station too. And then at 4 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock when that truck hit and the other work came. Now I wasn't there after at 5 or so as that's when we left that these were counted, but I mean, there was a big lull there, so not very organized and structured. If a person can sit there and play a card game on a tabulator screen, clearly there's something missing in the organization.
Well, again, it's very troubling, but thank you for that information, sir.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Senator Lucido.
Thank you very much for being so patient. I don't want you to run so fast. I wish your gut reaction when you were there at that time of the morning and seeing these ballots coming in and not seeing any other ballots around for 2-3 hours before that, right? What was your feeling, or what was it that you made any reference to about those ballots?
Well, it was my first experience to be down there and be a poll challenger. I'm more involved in this year's cycle than I had been before. So for me, it was novel. I didn't know why they would be there. I started stepping back and asking myself, why would things close at 7 and 8, and then at 4 o'clock in the morning, this proliferation of ballots would arise. So I just had questions that just didn't seem to make sense from that perspective, but I think others maybe want to make comments as to why those were so late.
Are those boxes consistent with what you've heard the testimony? You were sitting here during the testimony earlier. Was those boxes of ballots that were delivered to the TCF? You didn't see if they came in the back door. You didn't see.
I went to the back door when they came in, so I did see the truck. I did see them being unloaded. I saw a gentleman with a dolly that would bring some of them. I actually took the time to walk over to the tables in the center to watch them get stacked. I counted. I did a rough estimation because the tables were basically mostly empty. So I was able to get a general idea of how many were brought in at that time. And then at 5 o'clock, we were pretty much done with what we were doing that day.
Thank you very much. We have to leave, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for being patient.
Yep, you're welcome.
Myself and Senator Irwin have another committee meeting for Judiciary and Public Safety.
Come back when you can.
We sure will.
Senators, thank you. Was that just Bill Carzon that we had? Or I'm sorry. Thank you. Next we have Christy Klamer, followed by Grace Norris, followed by Jeffrey Gorman. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So my name is Christy Klamer. I'm a registered voter from Oakland County. I was a poll challenger at TCF on November 3rd from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and November 4th from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 a.m. on November 5th. I was there for a total of 35 hours. In those 35 hours, I experienced the chain of custody being broken in many different ways. I'm going to focus on 3 of them. Around 7:30 a.m. on November 3rd, over the microphone, everyone was asked how many Republican poll workers there were by a show of hands. When announced there were 2, I looked around and couldn't see any hands going up from where I was sitting. Not having at least one Republican poll worker at the 134 tables made it impossible for ballots to be duplicated legally. Also, there were no Republican poll workers to see the ballots being secured at the end of the process as well. Almost all the poll workers were told that they could go home at 11:30, this is on November 4th, p.m., even though none of the ballots were secured until hours after that. Tables with ballots were left unattended and not secure. And even at the end of the night, when they were pretty much wrapping up, I just started going through every single one of them, and there was 8 that were locked, but they were not locked. We made sure they were locked. I think it was unintentional, but concerning. Also, I witnessed 46 ballots get put in manually, meaning they were not in the electronic system and they were not in the paper poll books. I recorded each name and ballot number along with how they had the birth date of 1/1/1900. I witnessed majority of these ballots being entered between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. on November 4th. I was unable to challenge a ballot due to the consistent intimidation, harassment, and verbal attacks throughout the day. This came from Democrat challengers, independents, a lawyer, team leaders, supervisors. I was threatened to be escorted out by a Democrat lawyer. I have a very different perspective on how secure our elections are experiencing all that I did. It's very disturbing and disheartening. As you've heard today, there is much credible evidence that the chain of custody was broken time and time again, which created an election with no integrity. Michigan citizens are needing to trust our election system in our state. We are asking for a fair and honest election to be certified. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Klamer. Any members have a question? Oh, thank you very much. You've submitted your testimony in writing?
Affidavits more
Okay.
from here.
Thank you. Next, we have Grace Norris, followed by Jeffrey Gorman, followed by Jennifer Seidel. At the top of the hour, the chairman will take a 5-minute